something is shifting beneath the surface, and if you've been feeling unusually emotional, restless, or disconnected, this may be the moment you finally understand why. Welcome back. As we move through August 24th and toward the upcoming lunar eclipse, the energy around closure, reflection, and transformation becomes impossible to ignore. In this video, we're uncovering the signs, themes, and spiritual lessons you may want to pay attention to before the eclipse arrives. The energy is already building. If you've been feeling a little off today, a little too aware of your own thoughts, a little more tired than usual, or strangely nostalgic for no reason at all, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Right now, on August 24th, we are standing at the edge of something, not the eclipse itself, not yet, but the space before it, the quiet, charged stretch of days where the air feels different, where conversations feel heavier, where old memories seem to surface out of nowhere. In just a few days, on the night of August 27th into the morning of August 28th, the sky will host a partial lunar eclipse. And in the world of astrology, the days leading up to an eclipse are often felt just as strongly as the eclipse itself. Think of it like the pressure that builds before a storm. The sky hasn't opened up yet. There's no thunder, no rain, but you can feel it coming. Your body knows. Your mood shifts. You find yourself more introspective, more sensitive, more prone to noticing the parts of your life that don't quite fit anymore. That's where we are right now. I want to be honest with you about something before we go any further. This video is not here to scare you. It's not here to tell you that something terrible is about to happen or that the eclipse is going to flip your world upside down overnight. That's not what this is. What this is an invitation. An invitation to slow down, to notice, to actually pay attention to what's happening inside you during this window of time. Because whether or not you believe the stars are influencing your life, there is something undeniably real about pausing to reflect during a moment the world has marked as significant. Have you noticed it yet? That subtle tension, like something is about to shift. Eclipse periods, in astrological tradition, are considered turning points. Not because the moon has some magical power over your bank account or your love life, but because they represent a kind of cosmic punctuation mark. A pause in the sentence of your life where you're asked to look back before you keep writing forward. And the closer we get to that pause, the more the noise of everyday distraction tends to fall away, leaving space for the quieter, more honest thoughts to rise to the surface. So today, as we move through August 24th, I want you to think of this not as a countdown to doom, but as a countdown to clarity. The next few days are an opportunity, a rare one, to actually sit with yourself, to ask the questions you've been avoiding, to notice the patterns you've been too busy to see. Because here's the truth, the eclipse doesn't create these feelings out of nothing, it simply turns up the volume on what was already there. And by the end of this video, I think you're going to understand exactly what that means for you, why eclipse seasons feel different. Let's talk for a moment about why eclipses hold such a special place in astrological tradition, and why, even for people who don't consider themselves spiritual at all, there's something about eclipse season that just feels different. In astrology, the sun and moon represent two of the most fundamental forces in a person's inner world. The sun is associated with identity, purpose, the conscious self, who you are when you're moving through the world with intention. The moon, on the other hand, is tied to emotion, memory, intuition, the quieter, more hidden parts of who you are. When these two forces align in an eclipse, astrologers have long viewed it as a moment where the outer self and the inner self come into direct contact, where what you've been feeling privately can no longer stay hidden. That's the symbolic language of eclipses, endings, revelations, the pulling back of a curtain. Traditionally, eclipse periods have been associated with events that force clarity, a truth you finally admit to yourself, a relationship you finally see clearly, a goal you finally realize you don't actually want anymore. Now, I want to pause here and be very clear about something, because it matters. What I'm describing is a spiritual and symbolic framework, a lens that many people find meaningful for reflection. It is not a scientific claim. Eclipses are first and foremost natural astronomical events, the alignment of the sun, moon, and earth. There is no verified scientific evidence that they cause emotional shifts, life events, or changes in fate. What astrology offers instead is a symbolic language, a way of making meaning out of timing, a mirror you can hold up to your own life. Whether you use that mirror is entirely up to you. But here's the thing, even if you set aside the mystical language, there's something genuinely useful about marking time this way. Ordinary days blend together. We move on autopilot. Wake up, work, scroll, sleep, repeat, without ever really checking in with ourselves. An eclipse period interrupts that autopilot. It gives you a reason to stop and ask, how am I actually doing? What have I been avoiding? What feels different than it did a month ago? That's the real value here. Not prediction, but permission. Permission to feel what you've been suppressing. Permission to admit what you already know but haven't said out loud. Permission to let something end so something else can begin. So as we sit here on August 24th, days away from that partial lunar eclipse on the 27th and 28th, I want you to hold both of these truths at once. This is a natural event in the sky, explained fully by science, and it can also be, for those who choose to see it that way, a meaningful checkpoint in your emotional and spiritual life. Both things are true. Neither one cancels out the other. The first sign, something no longer feels right. Let's get into the signs. And the first one is probably the one you already know deep down, even if you haven't said it out loud yet. Something no longer feels right. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's a routine you've followed for years without ever questioning it. Maybe it's a friendship that used to feel effortless and now feels like something you have to manage. Maybe it's a goal you set for yourself a long time ago, one that used to excite you. And now when you think about it, you just feel tired. If any of that sounds familiar, I want you to know this is not a malfunction. This is not you being ungrateful or dramatic or difficult. This is what happens when a part of you starts to outgrow a part of your life. During this pre-eclipse window, that gap between who you're becoming and what you've been holding on to tends to feel more obvious than usual. It's like the volume gets turned up on your own inner honesty. Things you've been quietly ignoring for months, maybe years, suddenly feel impossible to keep ignoring. I want to be really clear here. This is not a moment to panic. It's not a moment to make a dramatic announcement, quit your job, end a relationship, or blow up your life because a feeling got loud. That's not what this is about. This is a moment to observe, to notice without judgment the parts of your life that no longer feel like they fit. The way an old jacket might still technically button up, but you can feel that it doesn't move with you the way it used to. Have you felt that lately? That quiet sense of outgrowing something? Let's make this practical for a second. Think about your daily habits, the ones you do without thinking. Is there one that used to bring you comfort, but now just feels like obligation? Think about your priorities. Is there something you've been chasing that, if you're honest, doesn't actually mean what it used to mean to you? Think about your friendships. Is there a relationship where the conversation used to flow easily, and now it feels like you're both just going through the motions? None of this means something is wrong with you. It means you're paying attention. Discomfort, in this context, isn't a warning sign of disaster. It's a signal, a nudge, a small persistent voice asking you to look a little closer at something you've been walking past for a long time. So for the next few days, as we move toward the eclipse, I want you to simply notice. Don't force a decision. Don't rush to fix anything. Just observe what feels heavy, What feels hollow? What feels like it's asking for your attention? That awareness alone is the first real step. The second sign, old emotions return. The second sign is one that catches a lot of people off guard because it doesn't always make logical sense at first. It's this. Old emotions start resurfacing. Maybe you find yourself thinking about a relationship that ended years ago. Maybe a memory you hadn't thought about in a long time suddenly plays through your mind, uninvited, while you're doing something completely unrelated. Washing dishes, driving, lying in bed at night. Maybe an old wound, one you thought you'd already healed from, suddenly feels tender again. If this is happening to you right now, I want you to take a breath, because this is incredibly common during eclipse windows, and it doesn't mean you're going backward. Here's how I want you to think about it. This isn't a prediction that something bad is coming. It's not a sign that history is repeating itself. It's an invitation to look at what you've actually learned. Old memories don't resurface randomly. They tend to come back around when there's something unfinished in how we've made peace with them. Not unfinished in the sense that you need to reopen old wounds or reach out to people from your past. Unfinished in the sense of understanding. What did that experience actually teach you? Have you fully integrated the lesson, or have you just been avoiding the memory? I want to be honest with you. Everyone experiences this differently. For some of you, this might look like an old relationship crossing your mind. For others, it might be a career setback you never fully processed, or a version of yourself you used to be and quietly miss, or a mistake you made that you've never really forgiven yourself for. There is no single correct emotional experience here. Your path is your own, and whatever comes up for you is valid, even if it looks completely different from what someone else describes. Have old feelings been surfacing for you lately, out of nowhere? What I'd encourage you to do, gently, is this. When an old memory or emotion rises up in the next few days, don't push it away immediately. Sit with it for a moment. Ask yourself what it's trying to show you. Sometimes we carry emotional weight simply because we never gave ourselves permission to fully feel it the first time around. This window, this stretch of days before the eclipse, can be a quiet, private opportunity to finally let that happen. Not through forced closure, not through dramatic gestures, but through simple, honest reflection. This is how old chapters actually close, not by erasing them, but by finally understanding them. The third sign, you start seeing things differently. The third sign is more subtle than the first two, but once you notice it, you won't be able to unsee it. It's this, your perspective starts to shift. Have you had a moment recently where something that used to feel important suddenly felt small? Or the opposite? Something you used to brush off suddenly feels like it actually matters. That's not your imagination. That's clarity finding its way back to you. During this pre-eclipse period, there's often a quiet realignment happening in how we see our own lives. Things we've tolerated for a long time. A dynamic in a relationship, a pattern at work, a belief about ourselves, start to look different when we finally step back far enough to really examine them. It's like standing too close to a painting for years, only able to see the brushstrokes, and then suddenly taking a few steps back and finally seeing the whole picture. I think of this as one of the quieter gifts of an eclipse period. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's this slow, steady sense of, oh, I see this differently now. Let me give you an example many people relate to. Maybe there's a friendship where you've always been the one reaching out, the one remembering birthdays, the one showing up, and for years you didn't really notice the imbalance. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, you see it clearly. Or maybe there's a goal you've been working toward for someone else's approval, not your own desire. And suddenly that becomes obvious in a way it never was before. This shift in perspective is deeply tied to a spiritual concept that shows up again and again in reflective traditions, the releasing of outdated expectations. Not other people's expectations of you, although that matters too, but your own expectations of how your life was supposed to look by now. the timeline you built for yourself years ago before you knew everything you know now. Has anything started to look different to you lately? A relationship, a goal, a belief about yourself? I want you to sit with this question for a second because it's an important one. What deserves your attention right now, and what have you simply been giving your attention out of habit? Those are two very different things. One is a choice, the other is inertia. And this period, this quiet stretch of days before the eclipse, tends to make the difference between the two impossible to ignore. You don't have to act on every realization immediately. You don't have to overhaul your life the moment something becomes clear. But I do want you to honor the clarity when it arrives. Write it down if you need to. Say it out loud if that helps. Just don't dismiss it as nothing, because this kind of seeing, this kind of sudden understanding, is exactly what this period is designed to offer. The hidden lesson of the eclipse. If there's one lesson that eclipse periods have symbolized across generations of astrological tradition, it's this: cycles change, whether we're ready or not. Think about the moon itself for a moment. It doesn't fight its own phases. It doesn't cling to fullness once it's time to wane. It doesn't resist the dark of the new moon out of fear that the light won't come back. It moves through its cycle with a kind of quiet trust, full, then fading, then dark, then rising again, over and over without struggle. Symbolically, that's the deeper lesson an eclipse offers. Not fear, not chaos, trust in the cycle. A reminder that endings are not punishments. They're simply part of how growth actually works. I think one of the hardest things any of us has to learn is how to loosen our grip on control. We want to know how things will turn out. We want guarantees before we let go of anything. We want the next chapter to be written before we're willing to close the current one. But that's not how meaningful change tends to happen. Growth almost always asks us to release something before we can see what's coming next. To trust the process even in the uncertainty, even in the in-between. This is where the eclipse becomes less about mysticism and more about mindset. Whether or not you believe the sky is influencing your emotions, the symbolism it offers is genuinely useful. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to control every outcome and instead ask yourself, what am I being invited to let go of, so that something new actually has a room to exist? Because that's the part people forget. Endings aren't just about loss, they're about space. When something closes, it makes room. Room for a new routine, a new relationship, a new understanding of yourself, a new direction you couldn't have even imagined while you were still holding on to the old one. I don't want this to feel frightening to you. I want it to feel like relief, because if you've been white-knuckling your way through a situation that no longer serves you, trying to force it to work, trying to control every variable, trying to keep something alive that's already run its natural course, this is your permission to exhale. You don't have to hold everything together by sheer force of will. Some things are allowed to end, and when they do, it's not a failure, it's simply the next part of the cycle. So as you move through the next few days, I want you to ask yourself gently, where in my life have I been gripping too tightly? And what might it feel like to loosen that grip, even just a little? What you may need to release. Let's get specific, because reflection is most powerful when it's grounded in real, tangible things, not just abstract ideas. I want to walk you through a few categories of things that many people find themselves ready to release during a period like this. As I go through these, don't judge yourself for which ones apply to you. Just notice. Awareness is the whole point. The first is outdated beliefs. These are the quiet stories we tell ourselves, often without even realizing it. Beliefs like, I'm not good at relationships, or I always fall behind, or I'm not the kind of person who succeeds at this. Some of these beliefs were formed years ago, shaped by a single experience or a passing comment, and we've carried them ever since as if they were permanent facts about who we are. They're not, they're just old chapters that never got rewritten. The second is fear of change. This one is deeply human, and honestly, deeply understandable. Change means stepping into the unknown, and the unknown is uncomfortable. even when what we're leaving behind isn't good for us. Sometimes we stay in familiar situations, familiar jobs, familiar relationships, familiar routines, not because they make us happy, but because they're predictable. If any part of you has been choosing comfort over growth lately, this is a gentle nudge to notice that pattern. The third is people-pleasing and constant comparison. So many of us have spent years shaping our choices around what other people expect, or measuring our own progress against someone else's timeline, their career, their relationship, their body, their life. But your path was never meant to mirror anyone else's. Comparison steals the present moment from you, and people-pleasing quietly disconnects you from your own preferences until you're not even sure what you actually want anymore. And the fourth is habits that no longer support your growth. These can be small, a scrolling habit that eats your evenings, a way of speaking to yourself that's unnecessarily harsh, a tendency to say yes when your body is screaming no. Habits are easy to keep simply because they're familiar, even when they've stopped serving the person you're becoming. Now, here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to try to release all 4 of these categories at once. That's overwhelming, and honestly, it's not how real change works anyway. Instead, I want you to choose one. Just one thing, one belief, one fear, one comparison, one habit, something specific that you feel ready to consciously set down. You don't have to fix it today. You don't have to have a plan for what replaces it. All I'm asking is that you name it, because naming something is the first act of releasing it. You can't let go of what you refuse to acknowledge you're holding. So take a moment right now, wherever you are. What is the one thing you're ready to release? What this period may be asking you to notice. Beyond what you might be releasing, I want to talk about what this period might be asking you to pay closer attention to, because reflection isn't only about letting go, it's also about noticing what deserves more of your care. The first area is your relationships and boundaries. Are there people in your life who leave you feeling energized and people who leave you feeling depleted? Are there boundaries you've been meaning to set, but keep putting off out of guilt or fear of conflict? This period tends to make those dynamics more visible than usual. The second is your personal priorities. If you made a list right now of how you actually spend your time and energy, would it match what you say matters most to you? Sometimes there's a quiet gap between our stated values and our daily choices, and this window is a good time to notice that gap honestly, without shame. The third is your career or creative direction. Are you moving towards something that genuinely excites you, or are you simply maintaining momentum out of habit? There's no wrong answer here. Sometimes stability is exactly what you need, but it's worth asking the question honestly rather than assuming the answer. The fourth is your emotional patterns. Do you notice yourself reacting to certain situations in the same way, over and over, even when it doesn't serve you? Maybe it's how you respond to criticism, or how you handle disappointment, or how you show love. Patterns tend to repeat until we consciously notice them, and this period has a way of making those patterns easier to see. And the fifth, and this one is especially important, is the difference between intuition and impulsive decision-making. This distinction matters a lot, especially during a heightened emotional window like this one. Intuition tends to feel calm, even when it's telling you something difficult. It's steady. It doesn't demand immediate action. Impulse, on the other hand, often feels urgent, reactive, driven by a need to escape discomfort right now. Impulse says, burn it all down tonight. Intuition says, I see this clearly now, and I'll move when I'm ready. I want to be very direct about this because it matters. Please don't make major, irreversible decisions in the next few days simply because an eclipse is approaching. Don't quit your job in a moment of frustration. Don't end a relationship in a moment of heightened emotion. Don't make big financial decisions because you feel a sudden burst of clarity that might just be intensity in disguise. Use this period to notice, to reflect, to gather insight. And then, once the emotional intensity settles, Make your decisions from a grounded, clear place. Reflection now, action later when it's steady. The next few days. A period of reflection. So let's bring this back to where we actually are. August 24th, standing in the days leading up to that partial lunar eclipse on the night of August 27th into the early morning of August 28th. I want you to think of these next few days not as a countdown to something happening to you, but as an invitation. A rare, quiet window where reflection comes more naturally than usual. The eclipse itself, astronomically, is a real and beautiful event. The moon moving through Earth's shadow, visible across much of the Americas, Europe, and Africa in the early morning hours. But symbolically, for those who find meaning in it, the days leading up to it can serve as a kind of checkpoint, a moment to pause before the sky marks a shift. So what can you actually do with these next few days? A few simple things. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools available to you right now, and it doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need the perfect notebook or the perfect prompt. Just take a few minutes, write down what's been surfacing for you, the signs we've talked about, the emotions returning, the shifts in perspective, and let yourself be honest on the page in a way you might not say out loud. Quiet reflection matters too. Even 10 minutes of sitting somewhere without your phone, without noise, just letting your thoughts settle, can reveal more than hours of distraction ever could. You don't need a special ritual for this. You simply need stillness. Gratitude is worth returning to as well, not as a way of forcing positivity over real feelings, but as a way of grounding yourself in what's already good, even while you're processing what's changing. Gratitude and reflection aren't opposites. They can exist in the same breath. And finally, setting healthy intentions, not rigid demands for how your life must unfold, but honest, gentle statements of what you're hoping to move toward. Something like, I intend to trust myself more, or I intend to stop shrinking myself for other people's comfort. Intentions like this aren't magic spells. They're commitments you're making to yourself, and the eclipse period simply offers a meaningful moment to state them. I do want to be honest with you about something, because I think it matters more than most videos in this space are willing to admit. None of these practices guarantee a specific outcome. Journaling won't force a situation to resolve on your timeline. Setting an intention doesn't obligate the universe to deliver it to you by a certain date. What these practices actually do is something quieter, but arguably more valuable. They help you become clearer, calmer, and more aligned with yourself. And that clarity is what actually leads to better choices, better boundaries, and a life that feels more like your own. 3. Questions to ask yourself before the eclipse. I want to slow down for this next part because I think it might be the most important few minutes of this entire video. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I want you to actually sit with each one, not rush past it, not just nod along, but really let it land. Take a breath with me. Here's the first question. What am I holding on to simply because I am afraid to change? Sit with that for a moment. Not the socially acceptable answer, not the answer you'd give someone else, the real one. Maybe it's a relationship you know deep down has run its course. Maybe it's a job that drains you but feels safe. Maybe it's a version of yourself you've outgrown, but keep performing because it's familiar. Whatever comes to mind first, that's usually the truest answer. You don't have to act on it today. You just have to be honest with yourself about it. Here's the second question. What truth have I been avoiding? This one can be harder to face because avoidance usually exists for a reason. It protects us from something uncomfortable. But avoided truths don't disappear. They just wait quietly in the background, shaping our choices without our permission. Maybe the truth is that a friendship has changed. Maybe it's that you're not as fulfilled as you pretend to be. Maybe it's that you already know what you need to do, and you've just been putting off admitting it. Whatever it is, I want you to know. Naming a truth doesn't mean you have to fix everything about it immediately. It just means you stop lying to yourself about what's real. And here's the third question, and I think it might be the most powerful one. What kind of person do I want to become in the next chapter of my life? Not what you think you should want, not what would impress anyone else, just honestly. Who do you want to be moving forward? More patient, more confident, more willing to say no, more willing to try? Let yourself actually picture that person for a moment. What do they do differently than you do right now? What do they believe about themselves that you're still working toward believing? I want you to sit with all three of these questions over the next few days, not just right now. Let them come back to you while you're making coffee, while you're driving, while you're lying awake at night. You don't need answers immediately. Sometimes the most honest answers arrive slowly, in quiet moments, when you're not trying so hard to force them. But I promise you this, if you actually let yourself sit with these questions, instead of scrolling past them, something in you will shift. Maybe not dramatically, maybe just quietly, gently, but it will shift. The message to carry forward. As we come toward the end of this video, I want to leave you with something grounding, because I think it's easy in spiritual spaces like this one to start believing that the sky controls your destiny. It doesn't. I want to say that clearly and directly. An eclipse does not decide your fate. It doesn't write your story for you. It doesn't guarantee heartbreak or breakthrough, loss or gain, ending or beginning. You do that. Your choices do that. Your awareness, your patience, your willingness to grow. Those are the things that actually shape your life. What astrology offers at its best is not prediction, it's perspective. A symbolic framework you can use if it resonates with you, to make sense of timing, to notice patterns, to give language to feelings that are sometimes hard to articulate on your own. It's a mirror, not a map, and like any mirror, its value comes from what you choose to do with what you see reflected back at you. So as this eclipse period unfolds, I want you to focus less on what the sky is doing to you and more on what you are choosing to do with this moment. Focus on your choices. Focus on your awareness. Focus on patience. Because real growth is rarely instant, no matter how much we wish it were. And focus on the quiet, ongoing work of becoming who you actually want to be, one honest reflection at a time. I know some of what we've talked about today may have felt heavy, old emotions surfacing, situations that no longer fit, truths you've been avoiding, but I want you to hear this clearly. None of that is a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you're paying attention. It's a sign that you're ready to grow. And growth, even when it's uncomfortable, is one of the most beautiful things a person can experience. You are not being punished by this period. You are being invited by it. Invited to become a little more honest, a little more aware, a little more aligned with the life you actually want to build. And that invitation doesn't come with a deadline. It doesn't have to happen by August 28th or by the end of this month or on anyone else's timeline but your own. Take what resonated with you today, leave what didn't, and trust that wherever you are in your own process, you are exactly where you need to be to keep moving forward. So let's bring this all together. We started this video talking about a shift beneath the surface, a feeling many of you already sensed before I even said a word. And I hope by now you understand a little more about where that feeling comes from. We're moving through the days leading up to a partial lunar eclipse, arriving the night of August 27th into the early morning of August 28th. Not happening today, but drawing closer, and in astrological tradition, that approach carries its own quiet weight. We talked about the signs, things no longer feeling right, old emotions resurfacing, perspective shifting. We talked about what you might be ready to release and what this period might be asking you to notice instead. We sat with 3 questions that I hope stay with you long after this video ends. And we came back, again and again, to the same grounding truth. You are the one writing your story, not the moon, not the sky, you. If there's one thing I want you to carry with you after watching this, let it be this. Change is not something to fear. It's something to walk toward, gently, honestly, one small act of awareness at a time. The version of you on the other side of this reflection, a little more honest, a little more aligned, a little more free of what no longer fits. That version is worth walking toward. If this message found you at the right moment, don't ignore the reflection it brought up. Comment below with one thing you're ready to release before this eclipse cycle unfolds. I read every single one, and I promise you, you are not alone in whatever you're carrying. And if you want more astrology, cosmic insights, and spiritual reflections like this one, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next chapter may be more meaningful than you realize, and I'd love for you to be here when we explore it together. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, trust your own timing, and let go of what you no longer need to carry. I'll see you in the next video.